All right, good morning. I am taping. Today is Monday, the 13th of February. I currently have no one on with me, which is totally fine. But let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to flip number 2 and number 1, and I'm going to first go over the hands-on test that you took last week. And then we're going to go over the Chapter 9 Flexbox example for a shape-up. I had people emailing me this weekend saying they're still having problems understanding some of the stuff. So we'll take a look at what's in there. All right. As far as the test goes, I made my own copy of what I did, and it's not, I didn't spend very much time on it. I cheated a little bit, took some liberties, etc., but it's right there under a public repo under JP Scott Rankin, the pet store. So we're going to go over that first. After we get done with these two things, then we're going to go over chapter 10 from Murach. And after we get done with the Murach, we're going to go over some CSS grid examples. All right. Tomorrow, I'm just going to jump right into the chapter 10 for shape up. So we'll do that first. Then we'll go over some more grid examples. My guess is that the lecture tomorrow, at least, probably will not take the entire period. All right, morning, Grant. What I've just been doing is just going over the email that I sent out this morning. And I said, I'm going to flip the order of numbers 1 and 2. I'm going to go over what I did first for the hands-on test. And then we're going to go over the chapter 9 Flexbox example for shape up. After that, I'm going to go over chapter 10 from Murach. And then we'll start to look at some CSS grid examples. All right. Tomorrow, as I said, I'll first go over chapter 10, the shape up. We'll just do it right away. And next, we'll go over some additional grid examples. All right. What my hope is, we're going to spend no more than 2 more weeks on the rest of this book. So I'm expediting this a little bit. So on Wednesday, I'm going to lecture on chapters 11 and 12, and if time, get into 13, which is on forms. On Thursday, we'll finish 13 and also do 14 and 15. What that means, if you take a quick look right here, let's see, jump back into here and to here. All right, that means that by the end of this week, all we'll have left will be chapters 16, 17, and 18. The good news is, just so you know, I'm not going to make you, I don't even care if they like it or don't like it, but I'm not going to give you any homework. I'm not going to give you any written tests. I'm not going to give you any labs. I'm not going to give you any hands-on tests on 16, 17, or 18. Over all of them, probably next week. All right. And we'll talk about them, but 18 is going to bleed itself into the next book that we're going to go over. All right. So that's what you have to look forward to, or however you want to look at that, for this week and going into next week. So again, the hope is by the end of next week, we'll be done with the book that we're currently in. Then we'll spend a week or so going over Bootstrap, and then we're going to jump headfirst right into JavaScript, just so you know what's going on. All right. So with all that said, this was my copy of the test. Again, it sure isn't perfect. Are there mistakes in it? Probably. Are there things I would have done differently had I had taken more time on it? Yes. So you look at it, I just made it for a fictional pet store. All right. And who we are, and there were some of the people, supposedly, these are all just pictures I pulled from the internet. Who you are, again, more pictures I pulled from the internet. And you'll notice that when I take it and start moving it down, then it changes. All right. And as you can see, when I make it even smaller, okay, it gets smaller still. All right. So that's what I did. So let me tell you, if you lost points on the test, let me tell you how people lost points. All right. Again, mine wouldn't be perfect, and I'm not going to lie to you. I believe that of all the people in the class, there was only one person who did everything that was on the test. So what were you asked to do? Well, you lost at least a couple points if, for example, and I didn't do it, but this was supposed to be stacked. I forgot all about that. So this right here where it says portfolio should say product. Underneath that, it should say about. Underneath that, it should say portfolio. Underneath that, team, and underneath that, contact. All right. Like I said, only one person actually did that. Secondly, what some people did was basically they ripped apart the one that we did. I did, however you want to say it, the one for Rankin for the AWD program. And what they did was rather than separate this top part here into two columns where you had text and where you had the image, they just had a big image there. You were not asked to do that. So if you did it that way, you lost some points. All right. These didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't care. I didn't make mine go anywhere. But one thing you were asked to do is if you clicked on the logo, you were asked to go basically back to the page. So if we take a quick look, and I don't want to waste a lot of time on this, we got plenty to do today. So develop a page to sell widgets or products of your choice. The header should have a logo and a nav bar. Mine does. Include the company name with an image logo. Really, it should have been an image. All right. And if you put just text there, I didn't really take off, but that's not really an image logo. And again, make the image link to the home page. So as you can see, that was 5 points. Include a single tiered nav bar with 5 links. All right, using appropriate semantic tags. So again, this should have been inside of a nav, etc. So this whole thing should have been in a header. And inside of that header, you should have had this information in a nav. All right. Then you should have had a section. And that section, again, sometimes people call this hero. Sometimes they call it call to action. I've seen other names for it as well. All right. And as it says, include a heading, a smaller heading, and an anchor link style to buy now. Well, I took a few liberties. And if you did, I was just looking, did you basically meet the requirements? Okay. I've had people in the past who have come up to me and said, hey, I don't really like the requirements. I can do everything you want, but could I do this and this and this instead? Yes. All right. Now, if that's as long as you're still meeting the basic requirements. To say I don't like the requirements, I don't want to do anything. No. All right. But again, if you ever have any questions, then just ask. All right. Then looking at the rest, there should have been a main with 2 sections of content. The top had 3 divs. Each div had a rounded image and a short description. The bottom had 4 divs of content, each with square images, a heading, and a paragraph. The footer should have had a copyright line with something like, again, it should have really been 2023. All right. And you had to use an HTML entity, ampersand copy. So it should have looked something like this. Determination. If you say, well, yours really didn't. Okay. All right. I think I met the basic requirements that were on here. Again, you may agree, you may disagree. All right. Here where most of the points were. Use CSS to responsively implement the page layout. So you had to use Flexbox. Should have been done with a mobile first. It's very hard, I think, for most people to do things mobile first. It's hard for me. I'm just telling you that right now. All right. And I actually, again, took some liberties in here because I didn't like these numbers that were in here. So in my media queries, I have different numbers as opposed to the ones that are in there. All right. The feature image should go above the text and the buy now stuff. So again, when you look here, and I don't even know if I moved mine. No, I didn't. Okay, so I should have actually reversed those. So I would have lost points myself on this. All right. But what I look for more than anything else is, were you able to go in there and use Flexbox? All right. So you can read the other stuff that's in here. Now, as always, and I always tell people this, if you disagree with the way that I graded yours, okay, if you say, well, I got a 90 and I didn't think that was fair, I got an 80 and I didn't think that was fair, then complain about it. Send me an email. I'll be happy to look at it again. All right. I will tell you that when I do that, I look at the entire test. If you say, well, I got a 93 and I would like to know where you took off, I guess that's fair as well. Just send me an email and I'll let you know. All right. So that's all I wanted to say about here. Again, I did take this one that I did, and by no means, is it perfect? It's more imperfect than it is perfect. But if you go and you look out on on GitHub, what you'll find if you go out there and you look at my stuff, if I go out here and I look at my repos, there's the pet store right there. So it's all there. If that can help you in any way, fine. And if it doesn't, then just pretend it's not even there. So that was the first thing. All right. So with that said, then I'm going to jump right into um, here, the shape up for chapter 9. Okay. What I have right now is a copy of the completed chapter 8 shape up. So what I'm going to do basically is come in here and start making all of the associated changes. All right. So in this exercise, you'll create a strength training page. Basically, that strength training, much of it that is just a copy of a previous page. The Flexbox layout to format portions of that page. So here's the specs for that. What should happen when we get done and we create the associated CSS is this page should be responsive. All right, and it should use Flexbox to achieve that responsiveness. Okay, so I'm gonna do these exercises here, then these, then these. So there's enough to do in here. All right, so let's just get to it. First, open the index.html file in the strength folder. It contains the basic content for an under construction page. So again, here's shape up, and there's chapter 8. So if I look in there and I look under strength, there is the index file right now, and you can see that's all that's in it. All right, as they mentioned. So if I bring it up right now, it sure as heck doesn't do too much. It just looks like that. Strength training under construction. Okay, great. All right. So open this. This file contains the basic content for an under construction page. I think what they want us to do, all right, is they want us to come in here and remove this index.html that's in here right now. In fact, I'm going to change this to index old.html. All right, so I've got that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my main page. I'm going to right mouse click, copy that file, go over to strength right here and paste that in. All right, so this is what I'm going to be working with, is this index file that's right here. All right, okay, so taking it from the top then. So open the index, yeah, contains that. Delete the two headings in the main element, then copy the meta element, etc. Okay. In addition, copy the code. Okay. So again, I didn't, they said it, but I'm going to go into the main element, and I'm going to remove the two headings. So there's main. I don't know exactly what headings they wanted removed here. I thought when I read this, and again, could I be wrong? Of course I could. But I thought when I read this, what, let's see. I thought what they wanted was basically the ones to be removed would be the, let's see, get ready to shape up. All right, etc. In fact, let's do this. Let's just grab everything that's in here. Let's just, I'll do it from scratch. All right, I'm going to keep in here the header. All right, I'm going to keep in here the nav menu, of course. I don't want that to go anywhere. But let's go down into main, and we'll just get rid of everything that's in this section. All right. So we've now, hopefully at least, gotten rid of everything that's in that main section. All right. In the aside, we're going to keep the additional resources. We're going to keep the footer. So what we're going to do is we're going to rebuild this section that's right in here. All right. All right. So right now, if I save this and I go back into here, let's go back into our main page. If I go back to here and I click, what is it, strength training? That's what it looks like. Okay. And that's okay. That's all right. We don't have any kind of link to any spreadsheet or anything. I should say to any CSS file. So that's fine. That's totally fine. All right. All right. Copy the meta element for the viewport, the link. I did all that stuff. That's all done. In addition, copy the code for the header, the footer, the navigation menus, the sidebar, and add a section element before the sidebar. I think I've done all that. So I think we've got this done, and I think we've got this done. Still quite a bit to do, but that's okay. Next, create a new style sheet named strength.css for the strength training page. Copy the styles you need from the main RWD file to this style sheet. The link element in the index.html file so that it points to the correct style sheet. Okay. So I'm going to come into here. And to make it easier, I think, which will make it easier, is I'm going to go into styles and I'm going to copy everything from this is the one we've been using. All right. So I'm going to copy that into strength.css. All right. And let's open that up. Now I'm using today, I'm just, because I am. All right. I'm not using Visual Studio Code. I'm just using Notepad++. It's easier for me to manipulate around in here. All right. So the body looks okay. I'm just looking at what we have to change in here. Right. Nav stuff should be okay, etc. Sections. I'm just going to, for now at least, I'm going to leave everything in here. All right. So let me leave everything that's there. And let me go back to here to where I just was. And in my index file that's right here, okay, let's go back and under styles, we don't need this one anymore. Again, this is in strength, so I'm going to bring up strength.css. All right. So let's see. Now let's remember something here. I'm not under the main thing right now. I am under strength. So I believe I'll have to say .. for all of these. Let's look. And I think, at least, I think that's why I lost everything previously. All right, so let's look and see if that's the case or not. All right, so there is chapter 8. This is the main one, so this is strength. There we go. So now that's what we have. It looks like the logo it didn't like. That's okay, we'll fix that in just a moment. We've got our shape up, we've got to move that over, but home is okay, strength training, etc. All that stuff came over, so that looks pretty good. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to basically build our page in here, and we're going to do that in just a moment. All right, let's see. Didn't think that was right, but we're going to see. No. All right, so I'll have to still figure out what the path is to that logo, and that's all right. All right, let's see where we are in here. Create a new style sheet and copy the styles you need. We did that. Then modify the link element. We did that. Delete the submenus from the navigation menu to make it easier to work with. Then delete any CSS that applies to submenus. So we don't want submenus in this particular example. All right. So the submenus were here. They were what is under stress relief, I believe, and what was under healthy diet. So I'm going to remove all of this from here to here. And I'm going to remove all of this from here to here. All right. I believe that's exactly what they asked for in here. So let's save it. Let's go back, and what should have happened now is we should now not have those submenus in here any longer. All right, so if I refresh, you'll notice that all of those submenus are now gone. Okay, that's good. All right, then let's continue on and see where we are. Oh, we're supposed to also delete any CSS that applies to those submenus. So let's bring up the CSS file, which is right here. And anything that says submenu, menu, menu li, ul, ui, believe that'll be gone, that'll be gone, that'll be gone. And then rather than remove them, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment them out, just in case if I remove them and I remove the wrong stuff, then I'll be sorry because I'll have to put it back in again. So let's see. I'm going to leave it like that for now. Okay, so what are we up to next? Modify the navigation menu so it indicates that the strength training page is the current page, and modify the links in the menu as necessary. Then add the content in the strengthtraining.txt file, all right, in the text folder. So we already have that content. Then format the contents so it looks as shown. All right, so let's get to both of those. So I'm going to have to go over, because I didn't bring that with me. So I'm going to have to go over where I have someplace. Let's see, I think yeah, I think in here I've got the answer key. Student download. That's what I want. This shape up exercises. text, and there's the strength should be in here someplace. Strength training.txt. Guess that's it. All right. So that is going to go inside of, close that. That's going to go inside of our index file in this section here. All right. So right now it's going to look terrible because there's absolutely no formatting or anything that was done to it. So let's go in and let's take a look at least let's take a look at the formatting that we want to do, at least get a start on that to make it look the way that we're going to want it to look. All right. All right. So when we take a look at the finished product, if we take a look at the finished product, what do we have here? Oh, wrong one. We want it to look like this. All right, so as an example, that looks like it's an H1. There's a paragraph. There's an H something or other. There's a paragraph. There's a bulleted list. There's another H something, a paragraph, etc. All right. So again, to start with, that looks like it's an H1. All right, then it looks like this was a paragraph. I have no word wrap on here, so I'm doing this manually. I don't know what size this was. I don't remember. I could go back and look, but for now, I'm just going to make it an H3. And then again. Looked like this was just an unordered list. So let's go in there and start working with this. Okay. All right, finish up the UL here. All right, Now that was done very quickly. It may look ugly still, we'll see. But that's what it's supposed to look like. I guess I never copied it over to chapter 9, but that's okay. Okay. This might be the finished one. I don't know. Let's see. That actually looks too good as far as I'm concerned. So let's see. Maybe that is it. So this is chapter 8 under the strength folder. Okay. And this says this is chapter 8 under the strength folder. So I guess that's kind of it. Now let's see if we do bring it up again right now. I know there's still changes that we have to make to this because it should be bringing that up as the regular home page or whatever you want to call it. All right, I believe this is the finished one that I have right here. All right, so what I'm going to do is you saw the changes that I made. Let's take a look at this finished one. I didn't think it was finished, but let's take a look at it and see what's in here. In fact, this one, all right, let's see if this, okay, that's not done, but it's not bad either. All right, so let's just take a look at what's in here. All right, so if you want to follow along, then you'll be able to. So what did we do here? We went over or what I did was I copied the index.html file, the main file that we have. All right, the main one. I copied that over into my strength folder. I took the existing index.html that was in the strength folder and it as just index old.html. I'm not going to use that anymore. Then I came in and made some changes in here. And let's see this because this looks wrong. This doesn't have everything in here. One thing that we have to do is we have to then come in and we have to change. We were supposed to go in and add a brand new strength.css. In fact, there it is. All right. So this strength.css that we added does not need the main one, which was the main_RWD. We replaced that with this one. All right. We kept virtually everything else in here. Now, it wouldn't hurt to leave that other one in there. If you wanted to do that, you could. For those of you who are having problems with the slick nav menu, again, this is what you need to do. All right. And that's the code that you need as well. All right. Now, when I look in here, again, I'm pathing wrong. That's why it's not showing that image. So let's see if I do a dot. All right. So if I'm in here and I do a dot, that's going to move me up one, right? So that should move me to here. So I should be able to go from there, dot, to images. All right. And I should be able to grab those images. The shape up ping and the favicon ICO, etc. So let's see if we can figure out why we weren't able to do that. So up here, that should have been a dot slash images slash shape up logo dot ping. So if I save that, okay, there that image is back, but the other one was not there. And I believe it's not there because I don't think that we provided it. So let me look. So for the other one, but I thought there was another one in here as well. Again, that's the logo. So let's look. Nope, it looks like that's it. All right. And again, I eyeballed this stuff. as far as, making them H3s, etc. I didn't know for sure what they were supposed to be. All right. And what you saw then on here was that when I went over, oops, wrong file, sorry. When I went over to here, no, where's my chapter 8? There it is. Again, by no means is this probably perfect, but it also doesn't look bad. All right. And in just a second, I'm going to go over the CSS that's in there as well. All right. Now, probably the reason that it's working right now, and it's not working badly, it looks like I don't have my slick nav menu, so we'll have to look at that. All right. But we still do have the RWD stuff in there. So that was the responsive web design. All right. So this doesn't look terrible the way it is, but we have not yet met all of the criteria that we were supposed to be meeting. All right. Now let's see. Now, if we do go back and we look at the original that's right here, if we look at this is the original one. All right. And if I open that one up, it does say in there someplace class equal current. See that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to go over to my strength one that's here. And I'm going to add it there. So in the strength now, it's got class equal current. So now when I come in and I double click on the index file, notice what comes up, strength training. All right. Not home anymore, but strength training. Well, it didn't. What should have come up there is strength training, and it looks like it didn't. So let's double check that. All right, that's what we want to have come up when we bring this up. So let's look again. Saved. Well, we shouldn't have to do this, or maybe we do. So this is the strength one here. Let's put it in here as well. All right. We're still going to the home page. I'll have to look at that. We'll look at it during the break. All right. Now, as far as what's done in here and what's left to do, let's take a look at that. All right. I think what we've got left is the stuff that's in here. So we're going to look at that in just a moment. So taking it from the top. All right. I copied over the original index.html into our new and improved strength index.html. We deleted the two headings. We copied over the meta stuff, basically by copying over the whole file. We got rid of the section, all the content in the section. We created a new style sheet called strength.css. We copied over virtually everything we needed from the main _rwd.css by making a copy of that. All right. We deleted the submenus. Now it says modify the navigation menu so that it indicates that the strength training page is the current page. Then modify the links as necessary. I thought that was what we did. This is the navigation menu. All right, we've got here class equal current. Well, probably should get rid of that one. You can only have one current class at a time. So let's get rid of that. And this was the main one. All right, so it's in both of those. And somehow, I don't know what's going on here, but I remember I tried to remove this and remove that as well. All right. That's actually the home one, so that one should stay there. All right, so let's take a quick look again. All right, still not coming up with strength training, but I think our strength training page, as far as I know, is done. The page itself. We'll go back and look. Like I said, I'll look during the break, and it's probably something simple, which is why I can't figure it out. But I think everything else that's in there now looks okay. So let's go in and take a look at the rest of the work that we're supposed to do on here. All right. Okay. We added the content, modify the navigation menu so that it uses flex. So in other words, what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to come into our strength. I'm going to come into the strength.css. All right. And I want to do some modifications on there so that it uses flex. We'll do that in just a second. Modify the main element so that it also uses flex. Allocate space to the sidebar and section so that they're displayed as shown above. Okay. So in other words, this additional resources that's currently on the side, they want that down on the bottom. So let's very quickly here. Let me do this. So this is the way our page currently looks. All right, cut that down to about right there. Okay, and then in here, this is the way so we've got strength training, we've got the paragraph, we've got the benefits, we've got the unordered list, we've got the exercise and sports, but we want this additional resources to go down here. So that's the biggest change as far as I can see that we have to make in there. So we'll do that in just a second. All right, so reorder them so that the sidebar is displayed, adjust the spacing. So again, so it looks like this. Modify the main elements so that the section and sidebar are displayed in a column. Reorder the section and sidebar so that it is displayed above the sidebar. Adjust the spacing as necessary. All right, so what we've got left then is to basically do the flex stuff. All right, so let's go into for now at least, I'm going to close this index. I'm going to close this index because it's confusing. And I'm going to bring this up. All right. So taking it from the top. All right. I don't think there's anything in the body here that I have to change. The font family is fine, the width, etc. I believe everything that's in there is okay. All right. This is just removing some padding, so that should be okay. Getting rid of the underlines for our A tags and bolding them, that should be okay. We do want this to stay maroon, so that is okay. So nothing so far is new. All right. This styles for the header, I don't think we have to change anything in there. The images, we don't have to change anything that's in there. The H2, I think is fine the way that it is. The H3, I think is fine the way it is. All right. So this is where we're going to have to start making some changes. All right. So we've got our nav menu here. We did a clear left. All right. Probably we'd want to get rid of that clear, but let's go into the UL because this is where we're going to start making some changes. All right. So list style none is fine. Let's start. Let's get rid of this position relative. All right. And let's get rid of the margin. Let's get rid of the padding. Let's do a display flex here. So again, basically anything that we have in here that we're going to want to be able to manipulate using Flexbox will need the display flex. All right. I'm going to put in here a flex basis. I want it to take up the whole thing. So 100%. And I'm going to do a justify content. And I'm going to say here space. And remember what that does is it's going to leave pretty much the same amount of space between everything that's in there. All right. Then our UL and our LI, well, we're not going to float anymore. All right. We were told to get rid of the floating. And it says there are 5 items. Each should take 20% of the menu. So we're going to replace this with flex basis, which up above we said take 100%. Here we're going to say 20%. So again, 5 items, 20% each, ideally at least. All right, ideally at least, that's going to handle everything we want. All right, so that's the ULLI. Now, I'm going to come in here and again, keep making changes here. I want the UL, I'm going to get rid of this. LIA, so in other words, this is going to be my anchor tag. All right, I want text align center, display block. Let's put some padding in there. The background color, which was steel blue, and the color of the text, which was white. All right. Okay, let's see, what else do we have here? Well, let's see. We want to come in here and we want in our nav menu, UI, LI, A dot current. So we want the current one in here to be black. So the text color is going to be black. And then all that is that's what was in there previously. All right. So that's all we changed here. Okay. We also want it set up that when we hover or when it has the focus, that it has steel blue. All right. Again, that's just because all we're trying to do is map up what was in here originally. Okay, so that's a hover. And that's a focus. And the background color is again going to be steel blue. In fact, I think that was a light steel blue. All right. Now I should be able to get rid of all of this other stuff. As far as I know, that is everything that I wanted to do, all right, for my nav bar. So I'm going to get rid of all this. Everything is there. Some of this is repeated, as you can see. I guess I could have gone over there and just copied it over, but that's fine. So what have we done? Okay, nothing to the nav bar itself, but to the UL, we made it flex. We told it we wanted it to display 100% with a justify content space between. We wanted these laid out so they each took up 20%, each of the list items that's in there. All right. Then for our the actual items themselves, our links, we made them text align center, displayed them blocked, added some padding, a background color, and a text color. All right. For the current, we changed it to black in accordance to what we had in there for our in accordance to what we had for the specifications. All right. Okay. And I'm looking in here just to see what else has really been changed. So let's see. All right. So we come down here and now we want the styles basically for our main element. All right. And there's just one, but we want main itself to display flex. Whoops, didn't end my comments, sorry. All right, so we want main itself to display flex. All right, and then we're down here to our stuff for our section. Okay, got our padding. Now we still got a float right in here. Okay, and we've got some other stuff that's in here as well. We don't want that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the padding and I'm going to get rid of the other stuff. All right. And again, they show you how they figured it out here in the comment. Okay. So I'm going to say flex basis here. Whoops. And we want this to take up about 3/4. All right. So I'm going to put in here 73% and order 2. That should make sense in a couple minutes. All right. Our section, our font size is fine. Okay. Our H2 should be fine. Our H3 should be fine. Our paragraph should be fine. Okay, let's take a look at the asides. Again, anywhere that we've got a float in here, we're going to be removing it. All right, and we're going to be replacing it with something. All right, so the float and the width that are in here, again, we're going to get rid of both of these. We're going to keep the padding. And this is going to take up the remainder of what's in here. So we're taking up about 3/4, a little less than 3/4 for our main content. And for that aside, we want it to take up about the other 1/4. Since we used 73% before, now we're going to use 27% because that's what's left. And again, I've mentioned this to you before. Sometimes you have to just figure this out by eyeballing. All right. So our H2, that looks fine. Our UL, that looks fine. Our aside, link and visited, that's okay. Our hover, that's okay. So we're down to here. We're down to our footer. All right. And again, we don't need to clear it anymore. We probably could remove that clear, I think, that we had way up above too. But all we need now is the padding and the background color. And here for the paragraph center, 85% white, that's fine. Mobile menu, we don't want it displayed unless we're in a really small area. All right. So in other words, if we're less than 767 pixels, at the media queries that are in here. All right. So for a max width of 900 pixels, we're telling the font size to be 90% with no box shadow. That's okay. And here for a max width of 767 pixels, let's take a quick look at that. All right. We're telling it not to display the main menu there. Okay. Change the background and decrease the padding. And again, I have mentioned this to you before. We are using the exclamation point important right there. And what that is saying is that should supersede anything else that's been set up for the select menu in this particular, if the media query meets. So in other words, if it's between 1 and 767 pixels, all right, for the slick nav menu should have that background and it should have that padding. All right. The mobile menu, we want it to display block. Unordered lists are steel blue. Anchor tags are also steel blue. Uh, Covering and focus is light steel blue. H2 is fine. Section, again, we don't want any more floating in here. Okay? When you're using floating and width, it's going to typically be replaced with padding. And we're going to put an order 1 here. And let's see, that's for the section. For the aside, we're going to give it an order 2 in just a minute. But again, we don't want floating. We don't want width for this aside. We'll have some padding all the way around it. So I'm going to get rid of all this. And I'm going to put in here a padding of 0, 0, 1.5 M and 5% and order 2. All right. And then finally, we've got the smallest stuff that's in here. This is literally for a smaller type of cell phone. The H2 should be fine. The H3 should be fine. And the P should be fine. So let's see if I made it better or screwed it up. All right. So we want to go to strength here and put this in. All right. We have moved that down the way we wanted to. So you can see what happened when we hit that breakpoint right there, how that changed. And you can see when we hit another breakpoint, how that changes. All right, I'll have to look at and see why the slick nav isn't coming up because it should be. But to my knowledge, everything else looks like it's working now. Okay. Now that was quick. It's 9:02. I'm going to give you a break in a minute. And with much of this stuff, all right, the only way that you can find out about it is to play with it. All right. And one thing I wish I would have done and didn't do. All right. I've mentioned these to you before. We'll take our break in about 2 minutes. But one of the things I had shown you out on YouTube, all right, I had listed for you many resources, but a couple of the ones that I listed, the first one was Brad Traversy Flexbox, and he's got a whole boatload of examples in this 46-minute thing right here. And he's also got another one that he made for grid. Now, they're going to take you both a good hour to look through each of them. This one is 47 minutes. This one is 53 minutes. But what I did, and it's already out there, so you'll get the URL for it. But what I did, and what I wish I had done with you guys earlier, was I went through all of the examples that he put in for Flexbox. He just had a couple PowerPoints in there to start with, explaining what it was. Then he set some stuff up. All right. And then he had a project. All right. Where he built, I think I even showed you that he built this. Okay. But I now have in there every example. I took screenshots of everything that he has done. Now, should you care? I don't know if you should or not. But after we get done talking about chapter 10, after the break, we're going to go over the stuff he's got in there for grid. What's cool about that one is he built a project in. He went through template areas and he built this right here. Okay. and it looks like there's two of them in here. This is the picture of what he had, and then this is what he built. And I think that grid areas are one of the most important parts of being able to understand CSS grid. So what we're going to do is it's 9:05. I'm going to give you a little longer break because I'm going to try to figure out why I'm not getting my the slick nav menu. All right. But we're going to take till 9:20, come back and finish up that. And then we're going to go right into chapter 10 from Murach. And after that, we're going to go over some of these here. So let's take a break right now. Come back, please, at 9:20. Hmm. All right, it is 9:20, so I'd like to continue on. And so far, we first went over the chapters 1 through 9 hands-on test that you had last week. And I also tried to explain if you lost points, why you lost points. And then we went over the chapter 9 shape up exercise as a class. All right. Um, so right now we're going to go over chapter 10 from the Murach text. And I think what I'm going to do is these examples that I have, most of them are screenshots. All right. So I think what I'm going to do is after we get done with chapter 10, which should bring us somewhere around 10 o'clock, I would think. I think we're going to call it a period, and I'm going to take these screenshots that I've made for you, and I'm going to actually go and create a file where they're in there, and we'll go over those tomorrow. All right. So we'll do that tomorrow, and we'll go over the chapter 10 shape up program. So by the end of the period tomorrow, you will have both the shape up Flexbox and the shape up grid. So you will be responsible on both of those for incorporating the code that I'm showing you today and then I'll show you tomorrow, and then also applying that stuff to the Halloween Superstore or whatever it was called, to that one. All right. Okay. And that'll bring us still for Wednesday going over chapters 11 and 12 and whatever time is left, 13, finishing 13 on Thursday, and also doing 14 and 15. All right. What I'm planning on doing is, and this is in my head right now. Okay, it's not on any paper or anything else. But what I think I'm going to do is kind of for, in lieu of a test for chapter 10. All right, a grid test. I think I'm going to give you some kind of a worksheet where I'm going to ask you to do something, and I don't know what yet. Okay, I hope to get that done by either tomorrow or Wednesday so I can make that available to you. Okay, I also didn't say this at the beginning of class, but by this Sunday, the chapter 10 stuff will be due. All right, you're already going to have by the end of the period, or or tomorrow, you'll have the whatever, let's see, what is it? Whatever one we do for homework or labs, the Halloween one you'll have to do, but the shape up one we will have done as a class. All right, so you'll have to finish that up, do the Halloween one, and do the written test, and that's what you'll have for Sunday. I should mention this. I think I have already, but just in case I have not, and that is what I am required to do with an internet class like this is you typically have homework almost every Sunday. Now, there might be a few that slip by, but typically you'll have homework every Sunday. If you've turned in anything, so even if all you've turned in has been a written test, let's say it's Sunday and you don't have the labs done, you don't have the homework done, but you have the written test done, and you turn that in by Sunday at midnight, all right, you're marked as present. If you turn in nothing, all right, if you turn in nothing, you're marked as being absent. Now, if there is a week where we have absolutely no homework, everybody's marked present, all right, because I have nothing really to grade you on. All right, so let's jump into chapter 10 then. So chapter 10, a little longer than the last chapter. Again, as it says, it's on the use of grid layout. This is called grid layout. It's called CSS grid. It's called just grid. It just depends, all right, on the book that you read, all right? And one thing I want to say, because I was wrong last week, so I want to correct myself now, all right? What we used for chapter 9 with Flexbox, I said was two-dimensional. I was wrong. It is one-dimensional, because what you are allowed to do with Flexbox is work exclusively in either a row-like format rather, or a columnar format. You can't work with both. Technically you can, but you have to put like a Flexbox within a Flexbox, and it gets really complex. All right. So it's one dimensional. On the other hand, grid, which we're going to work with right now, is two-dimensional. I believe last week I said it was three-dimensional. I was wrong. So Flexbox is one-dimensional, allowing you to work either in a row format or a columnar format. All right, grid is two-dimensional. It allows you to work in both a row and a columnar format at the same time. So that's really the biggest difference between the two. And they even mention in here, you can use grid layout to develop a complex page layouts more easily than you can with Flexbox or with floats. And again, the idea is there are still probably millions of websites out there that were built than 10 years ago that use float. All right. But float is just a pain in the butt. All right. And it is recommended that for any new website development, you don't use floats, that you use Flexbox or Flexbox and grid or grid. So as you can see in here, this is broken up into 4 different sections, right? There's an introduction to grid layout. Then they show how to define the grid areas. Then they show an example of a responsive web page. And then finally, they show you some common page layouts. All right. Now, what ends up happening in here when we go over this is I end up spending a lot more time on the pages on the right hand side. In other words, the odd number pages, and probably not very much time on the even number pages. And that's pretty much going to be the case here. Okay. Because like when you look on here, what they do here is there's a boatload of definitions. I don't want to read those to you. All right. But if you look here on the page on the right, they show you a picture with everything in here. All right. Now, one thing about this picture that you have to kind of realize, and that is they're making it look like, well, we got this nice thing here. We got 16 boxes. They're all the same size. We can break them up into a format like this, or a format like this, or a format like this. And yeah, you can. But quite often, when you work with a grid layout, it won't look nice like this. A lot of times it will, all right, but a lot of times it won't. All right, and if you say, I don't know what you mean, well, just wait until tomorrow when we start to look at some more examples in depth and breadth of coverage. All right, now when we worked with Flexbox, we talked about what we had was we had a flex container, all right, and that flex container contained flex items. Well, if you look here, it says a grid consists of a grid container, all right, but rather than talking so much about items, it says we're talking about columns and rows. All right. Now, typically, when you talk about a columnar format, this would be a column right here. All right. And this would be a row right here. Those of you who took this last semester, who took the AWD 1100 class, the C# programming class, we learned at the end of the semester, we talked about databases. And we said that a record was a row of information. So for instance, if you had first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, and it was me, first name would be Jeff, last name would be Scott, address, let's say again, I use 751 North Parr Road, city, Wentzville, state, Missouri, zip 63385, etc. And that would be one row of information. This would be the first names of everybody. So if there was Jeff and Mary and Sue and Jane and Dick and Ron, etc., that would all be that stuff. All right. So they define a grid track as being a column or a row within a grid container. And again, we're talking here with something like this, with like this example that they're showing right here. This is spanning both two columns and two rows. All right. As it says, the lines on each side of the grid tracks are called grid lines. Even though you don't see it in here, you kind of do. This little white area that you see here, running across here, and that you can see running down here, that's usually called the gap. And you can have a column gap and you can have a row gap. So again, the column gap would be the gap between different columns, and the row gap would be the gap between different rows. All right. So it says there a grid cell is the space made up by two adjacent row and column grid lines. So in other words, that would be kind of like a cell you'd see in a spreadsheet. A grid area is a rectangular area that consists of one or more grid cells. All right. So again, and this is why I took the time to go back and talk about the error of my ways and talk about the fact that grid is 2D, because that's what they say right here, and you can read it. All right. Now it says, when you've got a fairly simple layout, each cell can contain a grid item. In more complex areas, you'll define grid areas. I think, at least, this is my opinion, is or is not worth. All right, that grid areas, which we'll talk about later on in the chapter here, that's where this stuff really shines. All right. Now, again, in here, there's just a lot of verbiage. And if we go over to the other page here, this is some of the stuff, right, that we talked about before. Now, when you look at rows and you look at columns, etc., some of the stuff is going to be very similar to what we talked about with flex. Now, the first one that's in here is a display. So we're used to saying display flex. You saw it in the examples that I went over with you a little bit ago. But for grid, it'll of course be a display grid. All right. And then notice there's template rows and there's template columns. All right. And then there's template. Well, the rows, as it says, is the size of the rows. The columns is the size of the columns. If you're going to be playing with both, you can just say grid template and not specify rows or columns and use the shorthand. The gap I mentioned to you earlier, and I mentioned that there was a row gap and there was a column gap. All right. If you use just gap, it's a shorthand that allows you to set them both. So again, there's some shortcuts in here. So they're showing in here how to set up a 2x3 column grid. So there's 2 rows. There's row 1, there's row 2, and there's 3 columns. Column 1, column 2, and column 3. All right. And then they show you the layout for each one of these. Okay. So again, when they're doing it, as it says up here, okay, there's rows and columns. All right. So what you're saying here is the rows should be set up this way, the columns this way. And when you look in here, there's a gap. The gap between rows is 15 pixels. The gap between columns is 20 pixels. All right. So this is more complex than the way that we laid out Flexbox. Like it or not, it's going to get a little bit more complex. And when we look at the next page. So as it says here, to define rows and columns, you code one value for each row or each column, and you separate them with spaces. All right. If you use the grid template property, you use a / between the rows and the columns. So this is 2 rows, and these are the 3 columns. As it says, by default, grid items are laid out kind of the way we would read, left to right and top to bottom. All right. To set the size of the row and columns in a track, you can use, it says, any of the fixed or relative units that we learned about in chapter 4. And there's even going to be another one. And that's what they show here. FR. It stands for a fraction. And if you can look at it this way, that if this is your layout right here, all right, what I'm going back and forth on in here, if that is your layout, whoops, that if I set up something, let's say for this one right here and this one right here, and I don't set up anything for here, or I set it up to be FR, that basically says use the remaining section. So for instance, let's just say that we set it up like this, okay? And let's say that we set this up for 20% and 20%, and this was FR. Then this would be 20, 40, so this would take up 60%. So FR typically means use the remaining room that you have left. All right. And when you do that, as it says up here, there's different ways that you can do this. Okay, so FR, as mentioned there, represents a fractional unit. All right, it says use this when you build grid layouts or layouts with a combination of fixed and fluid. Fluid is always going to be the best. It's always going to end up looking the nicest just because of the fact, all right, that you're going to be using relative units and not absolute units. All right, when you work with this, as it says, when you are specifying the size of one or more of X, you can use repeat. All right. So for instance, in here, this repeat, this is repeating the 2 rows right there. All right, the 2 rows. And they'll basically each be 50 pixels. Okay. And this is repeating the columns. So this is basically, this is going to end up being a 2 by 3. All right, 2 rows by 3 columns. And it is kind of important that you start to understand when you talk about a row, column, or format. And again, for those of you who have, if that this is your first class, what you will learn about next semester, all right, in the C# class is we will talk about units like arrays, all right, which are a row columnar type of formatted structure. Okay. You can also use min-max in here, which basically says with min-max, you don't want it to go any bigger than this for a max. You don't want it to go any smaller than this for a min. All right. So what you're saying is no matter how small it gets, this will be the minimum size. no matter how big your screen size were to get, this would be the maximum size. All right. So again, this whole chapter is just filled with examples on this stuff. But until you really start doing it yourself, it's probably not going to make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And as it says on the bottom there, you can define the size of a grid track using, again, any measure. So pixels work, points work, percentages work, M's work, REMs work, etc. And we've got our new FR unit. Again, there are more examples in here. All right. And you'll notice there is an auto fit that you can use in here. Right. There, I don't believe, maybe I'm wrong, we'll find out in a minute, but I don't believe there's a wrap in here. I think that auto fit kind of replaces the wrap. All right. So notice they're saying that here, if you only have room for 360 pixels, that'll hold 4 of these. Right? So the next 2, basically, they wrap over to the other one, but at 720, you've got room for all 6. And then again, there's another example here. I know they look very similar with the examples. So as mentioned here, min-max is typically used within the track list of the repeat function. So again, much of this stuff that's in here won't make sense until you see it in action. That's why, like I said, I think that what I'll do very quickly at the end here is show you some of these things from what I had from Traversy, but I think I'm going to take the time tomorrow or tonight, I guess, to go and make and put this stuff down where we've actually got the examples themselves so you can manipulate them, not so you see pictures of them. All right. When you create a grid, you can align the tracks. It contains horizontally. All right. If the tracks are less than the width of the container, or you can do them vertically if they're less than the height. What does that mean? Well, very kind of similarly to stuff that we've looked at with Flexbox. There's a justify content, there's a justify items, and there's a justify self. All right. That's for horizontal alignment. For vertical alignment, pretty much the same stuff that we had looked at when we were working with Flexbox, the align content, the align items, and the align self. So here, this is if you're talking about horizontally, and the stuff that's here is if you're talking vertically. All right. And again, these examples that you see here shouldn't surprise any of you because the start, end, center, stretch, space between, space around, all right, and space evenly, we had all of those with Flexbox. So it says the next figure presents a page layout that uses both horizontal and vertical alignment. So let's take a look at that. Okay. Now you might look at this and you might say, that just looks terrible. All right. But when you look at it, what we're saying here is we want the logo to take up whatever this is, 15% of the room, then a navigation bar to take up the other 85%, some image, all right, then have some product information. This could be pictures, this could be something else, and then have a footer. And you'll notice we have a little bit of white space between each one of the areas. So then they show how you could set this up. All right. The body, the stuff that's in there, that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. Okay. But what is a little different in here is again the CSS. And you'll notice in here, starting right from the top, we're saying that for all 4 of these sections, for our navigation section that's in here, for our section that's in here, for our main that's in here, and for our footer that's in here. We want all of them to display grid. Now, the one we're not putting in here is the logo. All right. And you can see how the width is set up. I'm not going to run through everything that's in here, but this layout that's right here, all right, is saying basically we want an 80 pixel, 80 by 120 pixel layout. All right. So for this nav section that's in here, all right, what we're saying in here is we basically want it set up, all right, so that we've got this and this with 20 pixels in between. All right, that's pretty much what this is saying in here. Then where it says nth of type 2 right there, all right, that is what's called a CSS pseudo selector. So the thing that's in here, this that's right here, all right, this is number 1, and this would be number 2, number 3, and number 4. That we don't start with 0 like we're used to doing. But again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So our when we talk about nth of type something or other, all right, in this case, maybe I misspoke, but it says here nth of type 2. Well, there's 1 and there's 2. 1 and 2 inside of here. And that align self center is the navigation bar should basically center itself. All right. We're telling it to align the content in main, also be centered, and justify content space even, and then our footer to also align center. Okay. Again, that's how we're laying out the stuff that's in here. All right. Now it says in the topics that follow, and there's going to be 3 different things. We're going to go over the first 2 fairly quickly. And the reason for that is I'm not going to say they're not used as often, but in my humble opinion, the last one is used the most. So we'll talk about numbered lines, named lines, and template areas. After that, we'll go in and start talking about numbered lines with a 12-column grid concept. That's going to be important because the magic of 12s will become more and more apparent in a couple weeks when we jump in and talk about a little bit of Bootstrap. So the first thing that's in here, as they say, is they talk about numbered lines. Well, notice here, each line in the grid is assigned a numeric value as shown right here. So when you are working with numbered lines, everything is based off of numbers. All right. So in other words, 1, 1 would be here. Okay. 1, 2 would be here, etc. Now, what's important about this is this right here, this box that you see right here, this stretches from 1 to 2. Okay, and that should make sense. On the other hand, when we look at the header, it looks like they want it to stretch from 1 to 4. So it's taking up 100% of the room. All right. Now, this nav that's in here, this is going to stretch, okay? And it's stretching. Now, this was basically stretching in a row format. This is in a column. So this nav bar is stretching from column 2 down to column 4, not 2 to 3, because that would just be one column. All right. And this section that's right here is stretching from 2 to 4, row wise. All right. And it's just a way that you have to start looking at things. Like I said, in a row, in a columnar type of format. All right. And I've given this example before. I don't know if I have in here or not, but if I come in here and I just bring up Excel, all right, it's not exactly the same, but it's fairly similar when you look in here. All right. What do we have? I'm just going to grab something. It means nothing, but I'm going to grab this. All right. And what do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. There is the first column that we've got highlighted. There is the second column that we have highlighted. There is the third column that we have highlighted. There is the fourth column that we have highlighted. And within those 4 columns, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. But again, typically the way that this stuff is referred to is it's in a row column format. Okay. All right. So as it says, when you define a grid, each grid line is then assigned a numeric value, and you can use those values to basically set up any kind of an area that you want. You can use it to set up a page, any kind of a page that you want. All right. Then next, okay, it says that you can get similar results by using named lines. Here it says names have been assigned to each line in the grid. It says note that some of the lines have more than one name. All right. And you don't have to use the names. I don't believe here that they're using, but it sure makes it a lot more self-doc to use something like this. All right. So to name the lines in a grid, it says you code the name or names of each line in brackets. Okay. To identify the rows and columns, you code the names of the grid row and the grid column properties. Okay. And typically, if you're going to do that, you will have some kind of setup as far as to use for a naming structure, etc. All right. The next one that's in here then are template areas. And depending on your point of view, they're either one of the coolest things you've ever seen or one of the most confusing things you've ever seen. So let's take a look at an example here. Okay. And again, I'm not saying this is going to make any sense whatsoever. But if you look here, we looked at this example, and that had the grid line numbers in it. Then we've got the same example, all right, with the grid names in it. Now we're doing the same example again, but we're doing it with grid areas. All right. So notice what it says. Here's the properties. Grid template area is the name of the areas, and grid area defines where it's supposed to go. Now, when you look here, take a quick look before we go down a little further on the page. This head section is taking up all 3. This has got 3 columns in it. There are one column, 2 columns, 3 columns. All right. And in here, the head is taking up, all right, 3 columns and every column in the row. So it's stretching from 1 to 3. All right. And then we've got this section here, for example, that's stretching from 2 to 3. This section that's stretching from 2 to 3. This section that's stretching, but it's not it's not column 2 to column 3. It's stretching from row 2 to row 3. And then this is taking up the whole thing. All right. So what you typically do when you set up this structure is you do something like this. This is the grid template area right here, right up through here. Okay. Now, name this stuff anything you want, but looking at it, hopefully it makes sense that what you're saying is, hey, look, we've got 4 rows here. Head, nav. In this case, let's just use the first name. Head, nav, and foot. Okay. So head, you can see stretches across all 3 columns. Nav in the second row only stretches across 1 column, and sec 1 stretches across 2 columns. Then Going down to the next row, nav again stretches across one column, and now sec2 and stretches across one column, and sec3 stretches across one column. Finally, we've got foot that stretches across all three columns. And again, it's not mandatory that you name them head, nav, etc. You could call them any arbitrary name that you want, but setting it up more in this kind of a format makes this much more self-documenting. All right. The next thing that's in here then is they show you a 12-column concept. All right, it says this is a popular concept that's used frequently with responsive web design. Now, in here, what I am going to go over with you in a couple weeks, and I might probably have even mentioned it to you, but we're going to go out to getbootstrap.com. All right. And when you start working with Bootstrap, one of the things that you're going to learn virtually right away is when we go into the documentation, is you're going to learn about the fact that Bootstrap is a 12-column format. I don't know where it is in here, but it's in here someplace. All right. So this isn't going away is what I'm telling you. All right. It says, as you can see, a grid container that uses this concept consists of 12 proportionately sized columns. So one row is made up of 12 columns. To create these columns, you can use repeat. All right, if you want everything to be the exact same size. Now, that's not the exact same size, but if you'll look at here, what is everything should equal 12 that's in here. So the header spans all 12 columns. The nav spans 4 columns, and the section 1 spans 8 columns. All right, then that nav either is in here or these 4 columns have nothing. It doesn't matter. But still, 12, 4 and 8 are 12, 4, 4, and 4 are 12, and 12. All right. What happens very nicely when you do that, and what you're going to see when we get into talking about Bootstrap, is pretty much the need for media queries almost goes away. Instead, what we'll do is when we specify different things in Bootstrap, we'll say that, hey, when the screen size is this, we'll want you to have the format of, like you said, span 12. But when you get to this size, we'll want it to be an 8:4, etc. That kind of thing. And it works really nice that way. So as they mentioned here, the 12-column grid concept is a popular layout type of concept, and it is. All right. So the next section that's in here, the next several pages, 6 or 7 or whatever it is, as it says, it gives you a responsive web page that uses grid layout. It's meant to be very similar to one that they did back in chapter 8 when they started talking about responsive website design. All right, it says in here that you'll see they're almost identical. However, in mobile layout formats, the order of the article in the sidebar is changed so that the sidebar is shown first. So there's the main content, and there's the sidebar. So you'll notice in phone, we've got sidebar first and then the main article. Okay. So I don't want to sit and read to you. Probably a key thing is that middle bullet. Notice the widths are specified in fractional units or percentages. That way they are fluid as the size of your screen either expands or contracts. And in here, we're still using media queries. Okay. Now, what they do next is they will show you the HTML, which they're really, I think they even say it's the same as what we looked at. It's almost identical to the code for chapter 8. To keep the focus on the grid, there's no submenus used here. All right, there's just 5 list items, so that becomes your menu right there with no submenus. So pretty much this is the same thing they showed back in chapter 8. All right, then they get into the CSS. Well, of course, this is what's going to be new. All right, so if we take a quick look at it here, you'll notice that anything that we want to be able to use as our grid template basically is going to be a display grid. All right. So anything we want to use as a grid container, that would have been a better way to put it, is set up with a display grid. All right. So you can see that the body is set up like that. We've got a display grid for the unordered list that's in our menu. All right. And we've got a bunch of different types of grid areas, etc., that you can see that have been set up to basically lay out this document. All right. So it says there next, the next figure shows the media query for screens that are 796 pixels or less. Typically, all right, 0 to 700, and it depends. It depends on what book you read. Some of them use the more popular one that I hear is 768. All right, that anywhere from 0 to 768 is going to handle for you the size of most of all cell phones and the size of most, if not all, tablets, and bigger than 768. So like 768, really, I should put it this way, that 0 to 768 will do the best all cell phones. 769 usually to 1280 will handle tablets, and 1280 and above will be laptops, desktops, and other devices. So again, you can see the media queries that they've set up for smaller devices, etc. Then they get in, as it says, the CSS for the page with a 12-column grid. And it's all a matter of laying things out. All right. And so it'll be my responsibility, like I said, tomorrow to go through the chapter 10, like we just did today, for Flexbox, to go through it for CSS Grid, and then to give you some additional examples. That's what I have again on tap for tomorrow. All right. Then finally, the chapter ends. The last 4 or 5 pages talks about common page layouts that use the grid. Now, you may say, oh, I've never seen one that looks like this. You probably have, even if you don't think you have. All right. So in other words, you'd have a logo, some space, all right, a navigation bar, some text on the top, and these don't have to be images. This can be anything. And it's broken up into 9 units, but it's not necessarily going to look like it's 9 units that are all the same size. All right. This one might look like this and take up all 9. This one might be broken up into 3 and then 6. This one into 6 and then 3, etc. All right. Here's one. Now this really, when I started teaching this stuff, this is more the way typically a web page looked. In other words, it didn't have the logo and the nav bar horizontally across the top. Rather, it had them vertically along the left-hand side. You will still see sites that are like this too. So they show you that, and then they show you, as it says, an even more advanced type of layout with a lot of different stuff in it. And again, all I can tell you is before anybody says that you never see anything like that, you'd be amazed at what some people ask for. And again, if you are either somebody who is, if you're a freelancer and you're trying to get jobs, or if you're working for a company where they go out and get jobs for other companies, et cetera, and set up websites, you don't typically say, well, this is what we want. You don't typically come back and say, well, that's stupid. All right, you're not going to do that. You're going to give them what they want. Right. I think that's pretty much it for the chapter. Yep, that's it. Now, two more things, and then we will call it a period. The first is, if I go back here, and let's go back to here. I have told you this before, and I'm going to say it once again, that in my opinion, 9 and 10 are probably the hardest chapters in the book. All right, later this week, so starting on Wednesday and Thursday, when we go over images, icons, and fonts, it'll probably be a lot more straightforward than the stuff we're going through right now. When we go into tables, I'm going to teach us a little differently than I have in the past, because in the past, we only talk about what's in the book and we have you create stuff and do it a certain way. But I'm going to ask that you do it another way. Why? Because it'll help you in later classes that you take here. It's not really much difference, but you'll see it. 13, again, we will come in that day. We will build our own form from scratch. 14 is a really short chapter. It's a little over 10 pages, and it tells you how you can add audio and how you can add video to a web page. Finally, 15, which will kind of bring everything together, so to speak. It's kind of the dog and pony, the whistle type of stuff. And what I mean is, it shows you how you can have things fade into view or fade out of view, or very simple animation where maybe things move from one side to the other, etc. All right. And then we'll finish it up, not next week, but the following week, probably we'll finish it up with 16, 17, and 18. And then we will get right into talking about Bootstrap. Now, last thing I want to show you in here, and I put this out there already, you will get the URL for this, but I put all these examples. So again, these are the Traversy examples, his PowerPoints, and then he's got a bunch of examples that he did in here. But like I said, I don't know if it's going to really help for me to go and show you this. You can see that here, and I tried to most of the time show you what it would look like on here. All right. But I'm not going to go back and change those. But what I'd like to do is to go back when I get done with the lecture today, go back into here, not to here, try that again, into here for the ones that are in here for the grid, and to go through those examples. Again, he puts a couple PowerPoints in there, and then he jumps right into examples. But I don't know how much showing you this is going to really help you. But if I put it out there and run through those examples, all right, hopefully it'll help a little bit more doing it that way. So again, tomorrow when you come in, the first thing that we will do together is we will come in and we will jump down to chapter 10. So I'm going to take this thing I've been working with right now, the chapter 9 one that we did today, copy it to chapter 10. And as it says, we'll create a stress relief page, and that page will be formatted using a grid layout. So it'll look like this. It doesn't look that different from the other pages. What is different is going to be the fact that rather than using responsive web design like we used in chapter 8 or Flexbox like we used in chapter 9, all right, so when you look at this, basically what we've done is we laid out our home page using responsive web design, RWD. We laid out our strength page using Flexbox, going to lay out this stress relief page using grid. All right. There are not nearly as many things that we have to do in here as the last one, but we're just going to pick it up right here tomorrow. So we'll do that first. When we get done, we'll take a look at several examples. Again, I'm going to grab those from the Traversy thing. I don't think I'm going to have time, at least not right now, to do the ones for Flexbox. I'll just concentrate on the ones for CSS Grid. So tomorrow we will go over the example you see on your screen now, then some of those examples as well. All right. And then we'll see where we are. We'll see how far I can get. I might have to talk about this a little bit on Wednesday as well, but then we're going to jump right into 11, 12, 13, and then 14 and 15. So by the end of this week, we will be through 15 chapters in the book. But please remember that one of the things that I said was only chapter 10 work will be due this week. Next week, yeah, you got a lot. It's going to be 5 chapters worth of stuff. But I'll try to set it up so that I go till no later than, let's say, 10:30 for the rest of the week. All right. And then you will have some time, an hour and a half. If I get done by 10:30 Wednesday and I get done by 10:30 on Thursday, that's 3 hours, then 10:30 till noon, basically, that you'll have between both those days to start on that stuff. Plus you get an hour and 40 minutes today to work on the chapter 10 stuff. All right. So unless there's any questions on anything, that's what I had for today. Grant, do you have any questions on anything?
I don't really yet. I'm pretty confused about the grid stuff, but I just need to
Yeah,
see it in action.
right. That's why I said I think tomorrow giving you some examples like this will help a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow then. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.